Hello there and welcome. This is Jay Frost speaking to you, of course, from the Philanthropy Mastermind series and our show, How to Raise. It's really great to have you. I know that there are already a bunch of people here in the room with us and others will be joining. So I want to welcome you and encourage you to participate today. I'll tell you how to do that in just a second. As you know, this is now a regular Thursday show. So if this is your first time here, I want to encourage you to go ahead and sign up to receive communications on every episode, especially for those of you who are collecting CFRE credits. We will be doing close to 50 episodes this year. So if you are collecting those for your CFRE, I think you'll find this valuable. But even if you're not, there's plenty of training here on every aspect of what's important to us in the world of not-for-profit fundraising. And we're certainly going to get a great dose of that today from one of the leaders in the field. And I'll introduce our presenter to you in just a moment. I want to thank our sponsor as well, which is DonorSearch. We won't be talking much about them unless our presenter chooses to mention them for some reason. That's not through lack of affection or appreciation. If it were not for DonorSearch, we would not be now in our 10th season of the Philanthropy Mastermind series. So we really appreciate them. And if you'd like to know more about them or see any future or past episodes and future episodes of How to Raise, our frontline show from Tuesdays, or listen to our podcast, you can do all that over on the DonorSearch website at DonorSearch.net under the resources tab or on their YouTube channel, which is, of course, you can look up just by going to YouTube and looking for DonorSearch, and you'll find recordings there of the last 2 years and the 150 episodes we will be offering you this year. So once again, thank you for being here today. Our episode today is on how to raise, on building relationships that lead to major gifts. You're going to inevitably want to know how you can interact today and about the recording. So I'm going to tell you both right now and then introduce our presenter. First, you'll be happy to know that while we can't see or hear you, we can hear from you. Please utilize the chat or the Q&A. And in fact, I want to encourage you to do that right now. I'm not monitoring it, but I'm sure that our producer, Jack, is. And right there, you can just let us know maybe which part of the country or the world that you're from, which organization that you're with, maybe what you do. All of that information is so helpful to our presenter, and we'd love to know it too. So if you just go ahead and warm up the chat right now and just say hello, we would really appreciate that. In addition, you can also use the Q&A throughout today. We want to encourage you to utilize that as a way to ask questions so we don't miss anything that you have to say or anything that you're wondering about. The slides and the recording are available after the session today, and you'll be receiving them through an email that'll be sent to you with links to both. So be on the lookout for that. If you don't see it in the next 48 hours, just check your spam folder. And of course, you can always reach out to me, Jay Frost. My email address, which we'll put in the chat, is jay@donorsearch.net. There's also a little survey coming to you at the very end. So whenever you leave today, and I hope you'll stick it through to the very end, of course, whenever you leave, do fill that survey out so we will know what you want to see and hear throughout the year. That's how we program everything we do. Now, it's really a pleasure to welcome back a friend of the show and a personal friend, someone who has offered so much to our profession and keeps coming back to share more all the time, and that's Linda Lizakowski. Linda is an ACFRE, one of just over 100 of these folks worldwide who hold the advanced certificate in fundraising executive status designation. She has more than 40 years in this sector. She's helped organizations raise well over $100 million and trained over 100,000 professionals around the world. She's also a prolific author. If you don't have one of her books on your shelf, I'm surprised. She's written over 40 of them, including Fundraising for the Genius, The Development Plan, Capital Campaigns, Everything You Need to Know, and Reimagining Philanthropy and Religion. Linda holds degrees in banking and finance, communications, and theology. Yes, all of the above. That's not one degree. And is the founder of Learn with Linda Online, an e-learning platform for nonprofit professionals. And we'll include links to all that in the chat. Her contributions to the sector have earned her numerous awards, including AFP's Barbara Marion Award for Outstanding Service and the Lifetime Achievement Award from AFP Las Vegas, where she spent many years. But she's not there today. She's in a little chillier part of the world. Let me just welcome Linda. Thank you so much, Linda, for being here today.
Thank you, Jay. And yes, I spent my last 21 years in the Las Vegas area and recently moved to Kansas City, Missouri. So I'm looking at the people online and seeing there's a lot of people there from more climates. I have to apologize for my irritating cough, but it's something that I just developed over the last couple weeks, and I'll try my very best to talk without coughing too much, but I know that Jack will do a good job of editing everything for us. And I want to thank you again, Jay, for inviting me back again. I think the last time we talked, in fact, I believe you mentioned my book about philanthropy and religion. My latest book that I just recently had published is written for pastors. It's a pastor's guide to stewardship and philanthropy. And I've spent a lot of time fundraising for churches that I belong to. So I'm trying to develop something that makes it a little bit easier. So I just want to make sure I am sharing my screen, and for some reason I'm not, I don't think.
No.
Oh, I think I may have to close the chat to do this. I keep losing the
Oh,
option to
I know what you mean.
share.
That's all right. We can all be patient as you pull that up.
There, share screen. Okay. Okay, and as Jay
Perfect.
mentioned, we're here to talk about building donor relations that lead to major gifts. And I noticed I was kind of quickly trying to run through some of the people who were signed up. That we have, I think, some fairly large organizations and some small organizations. And if you're in one of the smaller organizations, I hope you're not thinking, oh, we can't possibly raise major gifts. We're just a small organization. But every organization can raise major gifts. However, you need to realize that major gifts are going to be different. Are going to be different for every organization, depending on the size of your organization. What is a major gift for your organization? So the first thing I want to talk about is why it's important to have major gifts. And those of you who are perhaps new to this fundraising game might not realize, but there's a wonderful publication out there that I always have followed from the time I was involved in this profession, and that was way back in 1988. As you can see by the gray hair, I'm no young spring chicken. But one of the greatest publications I ever made sure I purchased every year was Giving USA. And I really love the statistics in there. I'm not a statistics person, I have to tell you that. I'm more of a person who likes going out there and raising the money. But I realize that you have to have the common sense behind this. And a lot of organizations, right now, I have a dear friend who just started a nonprofit organization. The ink on her 501c3 is barely dry. And she's a dear friend and I love her dearly, but she's driving me crazy because she says, oh, well, I can get grants to get started. I said, no, you won't get getting grants to get started. You're a new organization. Most grant funders will only fund someone with about 3 years of tax returns to look at and of consistency into delivering programs. So even though organizations that do write a lot of grants, still grant funding in this country, the United States, and it's similar in other countries as well. I don't know the exact statistics, but grants usually supply about 15% of all the philanthropic dollars that organizations bring in. And despite the fact that I've written several books, I'm actually ready to start edition 3 of Raising More Money from Your Business Community. Businesses and corporate funding only usually supply about 5% of all the philanthropic dollars. So where does the other 80% come from? It comes from individuals. And how do we raise money from individuals? Well, here's another mistake that many new people in this field make. Oh, we'll have a special event and we'll raise lots of money during these special events. And I have worked with organizations that have tried to put all their eggs in one basket. And this is a bad idea, especially if that basket is special events. I once had a client, and I won't name the organization, but it was a national organization. This was a local affiliate that he was working for. And his organization held 14 special events a year. And yes, you heard that right. I said 14. And he was the sole person in his development office. He was the only person there. And they expected him to have these 14 special events a year. And I used to joke with him because he happened to have been a former Marine. And I said, only a former Marine would have the stamina to run 14 special events a year. And of course, he didn't stay in that job very long. And when you do run special events, what I'm finding is most nonprofits only count the gross revenue. You probably have heard this yourself. And a lot of times it's your board members and your committee members who come in and say to you, oh, we have this great idea. Let's have a golf tournament because the Boy Scouts just had a golf tournament and they raised $500,000. Well, they probably brought in $500,000. They probably didn't raise 500,000 because typically the costs of a special event are about 50% of the gross revenue. So if they brought in 500,000, they're doing average if they raised 250,000. But what most organizations don't do is they don't track their soft costs. The labor that's involved in running special events can be really, really horrendous. I worked for an organization myself that had a special event, a gala dinner dance, and it was a very successful event. We had a good attendance. People loved everything about the event. They really were impressed. But in the end, we raised a total of $37,000, which this was way back in the 1990s, so it wasn't a shabby amount of money. But for $37,000, I realized that I had a part-time staff person who spent almost her entire time for 6 months working on that special event. And of course, some of my time was involved too. And I thought, I could have taken a major donor out for lunch and got a $37,000 check in an hour and a half, you know? So it really just didn't make sense because they don't count those soft costs, the staff time, the volunteer time, the burnout of your donors. And believe me, I've worked with enough organizations to hear the grumbling of donors who attend these special events constantly and say, I am so tired of being nickel and dimed. Every month they're doing something. They're having a big silent auction, or they're auctioning off some big items on live auction. And they don't realize that donors get really tired of these special events. Yes, you're probably here, well, our donors really love this event, but do they really? So you need to sit down and talk with your donors and see if it does make sense to have events. But I typically tell my clients that one special event a year is probably all you should think about. One fundraising event, I should say. I mean, there are other events you might be having, but most of the time, when you look at special events, you're spending an inordinate amount of time, labor, donor fatigue, everything else that really doesn't make all these events worthwhile. So look at those individual donors. And if your event does something to cultivate those donors and to open up the door for another activity and another opportunity to go and meet with them and get a major commitment, then maybe that event is worthwhile. But many organizations, I mentioned golf tournaments as an example, and I have nothing against golf. My husband and I used to love to play golf. Now I got to the stage where I physically can't do it. But when you think about things like golf tournaments and tennis tournaments and walkathons and runs, most people are there because they like to walk or run or play golf or whatever it is. They're not there to support your organization. And I've always thought it would be really interesting to have a grad student perhaps take this as a special project to do exit interviews at golf tournaments and runs and walks and ask people who they just golfed or ran or walked for And I'm willing to bet that most of them have no idea who the charity even is. They're just there because they like to run, walk, play golf, play tennis, whatever. So you have to think about, are these events helping you cultivate major donors? Because that's really where it starts. Fundraising isn't always just making the ask. There's 4 parts of fundraising: identifying donors, cultivating donors, asking the donor, and stewarding the donor. So I want to talk about all 4 of those. And when you have people who say, oh, maybe your CEO says, I'm not very good at fundraising, I don't want to get involved in that. Or maybe some of your board members have that same idea, but they don't realize that they are fundraising if they're helping you identify donors and cultivate donors and steward donors. So don't negate those things. Fundraising isn't only just about going knocking on the door and asking for the gift, although that's certainly a part of it and it has to happen. So we're going to talk about all 4 of those activities. But first of all, I think what we have to do is define a major gift for your organization. And for some organizations, maybe a major gift is considered $1 million or $100,000. For others, it might be as little as $1,000 or maybe even only $100. So your major gift isn't all the same. Don't worry about what somebody else considers a major gift. Look at what your organization considers a major gift and how you identify that. One thing I think you can do is look at your donor list and see, what do the top 10% of your donors give annually, but also what do they give over a lifetime? Sometimes we only say, well, gosh, I've never given a major gift. I'm certainly not a major donor. And Jay mentioned that we knew each other through AFP. And for years, I was very, very active in AFP. I haven't been so much lately. In fact, I haven't even found my local chapter since I moved here, because I also am no longer driving. But when I was very active in AFP, I was on the foundation board for a while. And they have what's called a President's Club. I think they still call it that. And it was people who gave, I believe, over $1,000 a year, but 10,000 over a lifetime. And I had always supported AFP because I believe it was really one of the big factors in making me successful in my career. So I was supporting them at what I didn't think was a major level. But when I realized I was a member of their President's Club, I said, oh, I guess I've supported them more than I thought I had over the years. Not that I don't know who I'm giving to, but it just never occurred to me that when I looked at lifetime giving, I was a major donor. So you have to look at what a donor gives over a lifetime. And sometimes you'll find that some of your donors perhaps never give it what some organizations would consider a major gift, but when you add up what they've given over their lifetime, it is a major gift. And I always like to give examples because I think it helps you realize that, yes, this could happen. It really does happen in real life. But one of my clients, among their activities besides fundraising, they happen to run a thrift store. And they had a person who, every time they came to her and asked her if she had any donations for their thrift store, they would call and say, hey, our truck's going to be in your neighborhood. Do you have anything for us to pick up? And she would always have some clothing or some furniture or something. And if she didn't have anything, she'd say, well, stop by anyway, I'll give you a check. And she gave them usually about $50. She had never given more than $50 in the whole years that they were affiliated with her. And then one time they had, there's receptionist used to call her periodically just to see how she was doing and ask her how she was feeling and how everything was going in her life. And she hadn't heard from her for a while, and they were starting to get a little worried. And one day they got a letter from her attorney. She had passed away. She was a retired school teacher, not somebody that you'd think of as a major big donor. And it turned out she was a surviving sibling of 4, and she had inherited all the money from her other siblings because none of them had children. And she left this organization $1.5 million in her will. And they were totally floored because you had never given them more than $50. So look at the relationship that you have with people over a lifetime, not just what's the biggest gift they've ever given. And that's why you need to really research this stuff. Take a good look at your database and see what the donor's lifetime giving is. And then if possible, do some research and find out what they're capable of giving. So all of these things have to take place, but don't think that a major gift for you has to be the major gift that maybe your local university would consider a major gift. Maybe for you, $100 is a major gift. I mean, you cultivate those $100 or $50, and someday you may get $1.5 million. So how do you find new donors? Well, of course, there are a number, and I have to say there are other donor research things out there, but DonorSearch is one that hopefully some of you are using. And electronic research is really good because using wealth screening, there's things that you have to look for, and it's not always what is that person's known wealth, because you may not know what their full wealth situation is. But you look at their wealth, but you also have to look at what's their propensity to give. Do they give to other charities? Do they give to us? Have they ever given to us? Or do they give to similar organizations? Maybe you're an environmental group that supports a local river or watershed in your community. Well, if that organization is giving to major international environmental associations, they obviously have an interest in what you're doing. So what are they likely to support? What are their interests? What do they really care about? Some people care more about healthcare. Some people care more about education. Some people care more about social services. So the more you can research about your donors, the more you're going to find out what is really going to be helpful to you. They may be the wealthiest person in town, but maybe they don't give a darn about your organization because it's just not a thing that interests them. So you can sometimes waste your time chasing somebody if you're only looking for dollar wealth. So that's why it's important when you're doing this research, you start with electronic research because that's the easiest way to find information like the wealth and things like that. I've been around this field so long before any of these companies existed. It did wealth screening. I used to hoof it to the courthouse and look up property values all day long because it's all public knowledge. And this is something I want to make a point about with electronic research. Sometimes I talk to people who say, oh, well, that's not ethical. We can't look into, what a person is worth or what their property is worth. It's all public information. You're not going in and looking at how much money they have in their bank account or how much they have hidden under their mattress in their room or whatever. But this is all public knowledge. And believe me, if you're not doing this, somebody else is in your community, and I can guarantee it. But I had one organization that just argued with me up and down that this was unethical and how dare you suggest something like this. And I said, if that was unethical and I was suggesting something unethical to you, I would not have any of those initials after my name. They would all be gone because I would be accused of doing something unethical. So it's not unethical. It's public knowledge and it's information that is going to help you. But you can't stop there either. You have to take that information and then use the information that you found to build relationships with these donors. So how do we do that? Well, the existing donors that you have already are a gold mine at your fingertips. So don't forget, you're not just researching to find out who are the billionaires in my community. That's helpful. But researching your existing donors is really helpful to find out what their capabilities might be and what other organizations do they support. Again, you can find a lot of this out through these electronic donor research methods. And again, years ago, we used to do things like save all the annual reports from every nonprofit in our community and comb through the pages and see if any of our donors showed up on theirs. life is so much easier in this day and age. You don't have to do as much of that. But that's only the first step. Then what you need to do is have some screening meetings with your board or with your development committee. And your development committee is usually more helpful at this than your board is in most cases. And then volunteers, maybe you have excuse me, maybe you have a team of volunteers who are working on a special project, a capital campaign or some special funding project that you're about to launch into. And you bring those volunteers together and you say, okay, here's a list of existing donors that we have who support us. And here's some other donors that we found that may be interested in supporting us. And what do you know about these people as far as their interests? What do you think we should ask them for? Maybe there's a special part of our program that they would be particularly interested in. And is this something that you think they'd be tempted to give to? Is there some part of our program that really would appeal to them? What do you think we should ask them for? Who should make the ask? And you have to sit down and look at this. And again, you're not asking people to divulge anything confidential. I can give you another example of an incident that happened. I was working with a private school that was raising $12 million, and they didn't think they could raise $12 million all in one shot. So they decided to do a three-faceted campaign. The first phase was going to be for some needed renovations to the school. And then the second phase was going to be athletic fields that they lacked. And then the third phase was going to be an endowment campaign. And so we sat down, we had a team of volunteers who were mostly parents or some alumni of the school that said they would help raise this money. And there was a gentleman who happened to have 3 children that attended that school. And he was extremely wealthy, a very wealthy person in our community. Everybody knew he was wealthy. But he would happen to be a physician. And there was another physician in the room who said, this is not a good time to ask him for money. I don't think we should approach him right now. And that's all he said. And we said, that's fine. We trust your judgment. We're not asking you to reveal anything about why you don't think this is good timing. But if you don't think it's good timing, we'll hold off. And we did. We did not approach him. And it turned out a few weeks later, it was made public knowledge that he was in a very messy divorce. And it would have been a horrible time to ask him for money. So we did listen to the volunteer who said, no, please don't ask him now. And when we did approach him, he gave a very substantial gift. If we had asked him prematurely, we probably would have just got a flat out no and left him alone and not approached him after that. So you can really, by listening to people and based on the knowledge that you've done through your research, you will be able to find the right time to make the ask of that donor. So cultivating donors is important too. There's many ways to cultivate donors. You can have a big event, obviously, like maybe you can have an open house or something. You can do one-on-one meetings. So who should meet with this person? And sometimes it's not always just the development director. Usually the best person to make the ask is the person who knows them the best. So you want to make sure that someone is there that can open the door and get the meeting. And you want to also make sure if this person you've determined that maybe this person would really be interested in the new library you're building. They love libraries and they love to read, and maybe they're an author themselves, who knows. So you should know before you go there what it is that you're going to talk to this person about and who would be the best person to make the ask, to set up the appointment. And just those one-on-one meetings are really good because this is where, first of all, you get to tell your story, but more importantly, you get to listen to their story. You ask them questions. What prompted you to become a philanthropic person? What made you, and you might hear a lot of good stories like, well, my grandmother was the one who taught me philanthropy. Oh, that's wonderful. And my grandmother just loved libraries. Oh, really? Well, that's what we're here to talk to you about is our new library. And perhaps you might think about naming a room in this library or naming the library themselves after your grandmother, because she was the one who taught you to be philanthropic and who taught you to love to read books. And those are the kind of things that you want to do is listen to the donor. Story listening is a lot more important than storytelling. I know we hear a lot about storytelling and there's conferences you can go to and books and webinars and just about storytelling, but the story listening to me is the most important thing. And again, taking them on individual tours of the organization. Now, if yours is an organization that serves recovering alcoholics or drug addicts, you can't probably take them on a tour of your institution where they might see somebody, and confidentiality has to be the most important thing here. But if yours is an organization where what you're doing can be easily public knowledge and without losing anyone's confidentiality, take them on a tour of your organization. I had a client who was a free medical clinic, and they didn't want to take people on the tours where they might run into some of their clients, but they took them on the tours and showed them things like their pharmacy that they had on in house, and the doctors and the dentists, and they met who was involved and the organization, and they were so impressed with this facility that every single person they brought on a tour either ended up donating or volunteering. I don't think they ever brought anybody in there that didn't somehow get involved in that organization. So it was really, really important for them. And then you might want to do some special things like for certain groups of people. If you've never raised money from your business community, I've had some wonderful success with business leaders breakfast, where we invite people to come in and learn more about our organization, but we also learn about their companies and what things their companies are interested in doing. Maybe they have a huge volunteer program at their business, and they say, gosh, some of our employees could come in here and volunteer for your organization. It's not money per se, but it's something that's going to be a big help to you. Or you could have cocktail parties or small dinners, and a board member or staff member even in their home. You can have that open house where you invite the general public and find out who seems to be really interested in what in your organization. You could also hold focus groups, maybe bring together a group of people. And here's where oftentimes you can get business leaders together and say, we're having some issues in learning how to market our nonprofit organization. So you invite people from marketing departments of the businesses, and they come in and you find out what works for them, and maybe there's a way they can help you. You can have a non-ask event where you don't ask for money, but you don't spend a lot of money, and it's not a big gala dinner dance where you're going to have a steak dinner and everything, but maybe you just have a lunch where you invite people to come in and hear about your organization, maybe hear some testimonials. That medical clinic I mentioned, they had an event every year, and they did have people who were willing to stand up and talk about the services they got from this organization. And one of the things that I thought was really, really powerful was one year they had a woman stand up who was an RN, but she lost her job and had no medical insurance. And suddenly she was faced with huge medical bills that she just didn't have the money to pay. And I think when people heard her story, they realized, it's not just the poor and the homeless that come in here. This could happen to me. This could happen to anyone. We could lose our health insurance and not be able to get the medical care that we need. So things like that really make an impact on people when they hear stories like that. So the more you can do to get your story made known to them, but also at these events, to have staff and board members scattered around the room so they can talk to people and hear their stories too. So there's a lot of ways to cultivate donors, and it's really important that you get to know them and that they get to know you. So it's really important. The one thing that's important about any of these cultivation activities and events is, first of all, that you're asking for their advice. You're not just telling them what your organization does, but you might say, gee, we feel like there's this population that might need more service from us. Maybe it's a certain area of town or a certain ethnic group or something. Do you have any advice for us on how we could reach those people? And asking advice is really the best thing to do. There's an old saying that probably a lot of you have heard: if you ask for money, oftentimes you get advice. If you ask for advice, you'll probably end up getting money. So that's a really critical thing to remember. And then always fill out a call report after any activity that you do to cultivate donors, whether it's a group activity or a one-on-one activity. Fill out a call report. We went to meet this person, we went for lunch together, and this is what we talked about, and this is where their interest is. And they said they would be interested in funding this particular program, or right now this is not a good time for them. They're just got a divorce, or their business is going badly or something, or this is a really good time to ask, and they just sold their business and they have a lot of money to get rid of. So fill all that information out on your call report and track it in your donor software system with, what are you going to do next? What's the next step with this donor? We have to wait a couple months and then go back and see them, or they have some questions that they want answered. We need to take them our budget or for this particular project, or they want to see our financial reports for the last year. Whatever it is, track everything in your system so that you have a good record of this, because I always think I have a good memory, but let me tell you, we don't all have good memories all the time. And the more you should do is, when you meet with an individual donor to cultivate them, or have a group of people in for cultivation, you should have a debriefing as soon as that is over, and make sure that you keep track of everything that was said and done, and that's relevant to the situation, of course. Now, how do we encourage major gifts? Well, one of the things that I think is really important is, a lot of organizations find giving clubs really helpful. And sometimes we might think, well, does it really make any difference if a person gives $100 or $250? Well, of course it makes a difference if it's going to add up. But I remember when my very first job in development, now this is back in the 1980s, so the amounts of money we're talking about are a lot less. But when I took my first development job, my vice president, I was the assistant vice president, and he said, we ask all our staff to support the organization. And so it was a university. So he said, for $100, you'll be a member of the Century Club. Well, that didn't sound very exciting to me. I thought, sounds like I'm 100 years old, and now I'm getting closer to being 100 years old. But at that time, I didn't think it sounded like much fun. But for $250, you could be a member of the Scholars Club. And I thought, well, that's a lot more exciting to be a member of the Scholars Club than the Century Club. So of course I gave $250 because I wanted to be a member of the Scholars Club. So those kind of things do make sense, but you have to be cautious about that too. I once worked with an art group that their highest giving level was the Picasso Club, and the second highest was the Michelangelo Club. And personally, nothing against Picasso, but I just never cared for modern art. I much would have preferred, I said, if I had that kind of money to give, I'd give at a lower level, because I'd want to be part of the Michelangelo Club, not part of the Picasso Club. So you have to be really careful when you're naming things. If you can name it the Founders Club, sometimes is a good terminology. And unless you're a mining company, don't go with gold, silver, and platinum and bronze. That's kind of, I think it's boring. But try to come up with some names that mean something to your particular organization. And then having a strong case for support is the closest thing that you can do to encourage major gifts, because in your case for support, you're going to tell people how much you need to raise. It's not just a marketing piece, it's a fundraising piece, remember that. And you're going to tell them how much you need to raise and why those lead gifts are important to you. So if you have in your case for support gifts at certain levels, then people will find the level that's appropriate for them. So the case for support is really, really critical in a major gift ask. So now when you're ready to make the ask, who is the best team? Well, as I said, usually the person who knows a person best should be the person to go at least on the call, but they may not feel comfortable making the ask. So it has to be the person who feels comfortable asking for that gift. And usually a volunteer is good because they're probably giving at the same level that their friends are capable of giving at. And oftentimes staff person can't be giving at that level. So somebody who's a good friend of mine might say, come on, Linda, I know you really care about this organization as much as I do, and I'm giving $500 and I think you should join me. I would probably respond to that because I think, well, this friend knows me. They knows I know what I like, and they know how much I'm capable of giving, most likely. So the picking the right team is important, but everybody on that team needs to know your case for support, needs to feel comfortable talking about that case for support. And most of all, they need to listen. I always say that sometimes when you have two people on a call, a lot of times you'll find one person loves to talk and they'll do a lot of talking, but they're not a good listener. And the person who's a good listener and a good observer is probably the person who's going to be more successful in making the ask because they know what the person is saying. There was a gentleman in one of the communities I lived in. He's now deceased, but he was very wealthy billionaire. And a university came to call on him, and he came to an AFP meeting and told this story. So I know it's true. He heard it from his own lips. He said this university came and asked him to support, I forget what department it was that they wanted some support for, but he said, they sat in my office for like an hour, and he said, obviously they were very oblivious to their surroundings, because on my desk was something I was very proud of. It was a conductor's baton from the local symphony that they had given this man as a token of one of his multi-million-dollar gifts. But he said that baton meant so much to me. It got a prime location on my desk because I was really interested in music. And he said, if they had asked me to support the music department, they would have got a much larger gift than they got. And he said, I gave them some money, but it was kind of go away money. And so I think listening and observing is really critical before you make the ask. But do be prepared, have an amount in mind, know what you're going in there to ask for. You've done all this research, you've done the cultivation, you know what this person is capable of giving. And you always ask high, because you can't ever negotiate up. You can always negotiate down, but you can't ever negotiate up. So you say to this person, we're hoping you give us $500,000 for this project that we know you're interested in. And most likely they will probably say yes if you've done all your homework and you know what their capabilities are and what their interests are. But if not, well, I don't think I can do that right now, but maybe I could give you 250 this year and 250 for the next 2 years. Well, you've gotten 750,000 out of them all of a sudden. If you give them options, maybe they can't do it all at one time, or maybe they can pool with other family members and make it a family gift. There are a lot of different options. So be aware of all the different options that people have. And then how to ask, as I said, is really the easy part once you've done your homework. But sometimes there's objections. Maybe they'll say, I'm not really interested in that particular project. Oh, well, maybe we misread what your interest was. And is it just a bad timing now? Or is it just not the right project for you? Usually when someone says no, it's not no forever. It's no, not right now, or no, not for that project. Or maybe it's just no for your organization. Maybe you totally misread them and they're not interested. And that's fine. Then you move on and thank them for their time. And in fact, I had one friend of mine who was offered to gift her organization, and she knew that the donor wasn't really interested in her organization as much as she was in something else. And she said, maybe this isn't the right project for you. That's fine. Here's an organization who does do what you're interested in. And she actually referred them to another organization. And later that donor came back and was so grateful for her connection to the other organization that she did give her a big gift. So those things are really important. But again, it's always important to keep track of your results. That's what you have a donor software system for, is to make sure that you can track everything in there and know when it's time to go back, when it's time maybe to ask for more money, or when it's time to maybe ask them to introduce you to some of their friends too. So I want to close with talking about stewardship of donors, because this is really important too. First of all, there's acknowledgement and there's recognition. There's two different things. Every donor wants to be acknowledged. I can guarantee that there isn't a donor in the world who doesn't want you to say thank you to them. And so sending prompt thank you letters is really important. I think within 24 hours, you need to get out a thank you letter to every donor. And also you need, I'm not an accountant, I'm not going to give you legal advice or accounting advice, but you do need to be aware of IRS requirements, such as if they got anything in return, like they came to a gala dinner dance that cost them $250, but the meal and the entertainment were worth $150. They didn't make a $250 donation, they made a $100 donation. So those things I think are really critical, that you make sure you acknowledge donors. And believe me, if you've ever been in this situation where you've made a donation and not been thanked, you probably never made another donation to that organization. And I can tell you there's an organization that I had no personal connection with. They, at the time I started giving to them, I was living in Nevada and they were located in South Dakota. But I really felt what they were doing was an important thing. It's a Catholic school for Native American children, that not only I knew they were getting a good education, but they were also learning about their culture. And considering that, I don't want to get political here, but for a country that tried to wipe away a whole culture of people that they were, when they came to this country, I really felt it was important that these kids should be learning about their culture. So I got a letter from them, totally impromptu. I was sure it was just from some mailing list they bought. And I gave them a $15 gift. I mean, no big deal. But I made the gift online, and within seconds, I got a thank you letter from the chaplain of the school. And but 2 days later, I got a thank you letter in the mail. And I said, you don't have to send me thank you letters in mail. I'll do all my giving electronically. I ended up signing up for monthly giving. And then I got so impressed with their acknowledgement that they did. They send me letters constantly, not constantly, but periodically. I get a letter from one of the students with a drawing that they've made, and they tell me about their school and how it's going and what their best subjects are and what they like the most and what they want to do when they grow up. So I feel emotionally attached to these kids. So I just recently raised my monthly giving and will probably continue to do so. So everybody wants that thank you letter. Now, recognition is a little bit different, and not everybody wants recognition. Some people don't want to be listed on your website or in a newsletter. Some people don't want their name revealed at all, maybe because they just don't want to be hit up by everybody else in town. Or maybe they don't want everybody knowing what organizations they support. So not every donor wants recognition. So make sure that when you do get a gift, that you ask them if you can recognize them or if they would prefer to remain anonymous. But stewardship is really critical. And the third part of stewardship is good financial management, using the donor's money the way they intended, and making sure that your board reads your 990 forms and that everything is legit and on the up and up, and letting the donor know how their money actually helped save or change lives. This is what the most important thing is. Carnegie Mellon did a study many years ago, and I'm sure it's still true, that the thing that most donors expected from the organizations they supported was, I want to know how my money's being used. And even if you give a $50 gift and they get a letter that says, your $50 enabled us to buy milk for our after-school program for this month, that's something very practical that people can get their arms around. So stewarding donors is more than just thanking and recognizing, it's letting people know how you used your money. I do want to mention something called the Major Gift Ramp Up Program, which is a good tool that you might want to look into, either hosting or attending a 2-day conference. And it's a program that can help you trying to start a major gift program if this is all new to you. So I know I probably went a little bit longer than I should have, but I do want to allow some time for questions and answers. So Jay, if we have some questions in the chat room.
Sure. And Linda, before you do that, I know you have a slide, I think, with your contact information. That may have been the very first one or the last one, but if you could put that on the screen for a
I
second.
do, yes.
I want to make sure that people know where they can reach you. And then we're going to jump right into Q&A. But as you can see, and if you're listening to this, I want to make sure you have, excuse me, Linda's contact information. You can find her at lindalysakowski.com. That's LINDALYSAKOWSKI.com, or at learnwithlinda.online. That's pretty easy to remember. And of course, her email address is just Linda at, and it's her email, her URL. And she's also listed her phone at 702-580-1448. Linda,
It
if you
might be hard to get me on the phone, but email I always answer.
And if you wouldn't mind coming back onto camera or stop sharing so people can see you, and we'll grab some of these questions that are coming up now. If you have a question, please do post it in the Q&A so we won't miss it. If it's in the chat, and we'll go ahead and draw from those now. And before we do, I just want to let you all know what's coming right up in case you have to leave as we go through Q&A. So coming up on the podcast, we have a conversation with Natalie Silverstein, the author of Simple Acts, The Busy Teen's Guide to Making a Difference, which I hope you'll enjoy listening to. She's a really interesting person. And that's, again, available on the PM podcast, wherever you like to listen, or on the DonorSearch website or DonorSearch YouTube channel. Also, next Tuesday on our Frontlines program, which is a news program where we also have interviews with authors, we have Haley Cooper, author of Sow, Grow, Lead. I'm sure you'll find that an interesting discussion. Just this Tuesday, we had a discussion with the folks behind the National Association, the Council of Nonprofits, I should say. And they talked a lot about the new executive orders. So lots of good information there. And next Thursday in this series, for your CFRE credits, we have 6 steps for impact report success, enhancing retention and stewardship, which is a great companion to what you're experiencing today with Linda. That's with Josh Kligman, co-founder and CEO of StoryRaise. So be on the lookout for all that, or check out, of course, the DonorSearch site for announcements, or you can follow me on LinkedIn for that. Now, Linda, we do have a number of questions here, so I'm just going to go ahead and grab those for you if I can regain my screen. There we go. So the first one came in from my favorite attendee, Anonymous. We always get that. And we really respect that. I always laugh about it, but we all have a lot of questions. So if you have one, you're not sure if you want to be list your name associated with it, feel free to use anonymous in posting. And the question is, I work with a portfolio of approximately 110 major donors who give $10,000 annually. Some of them have great relationships with them. How often is it natural for me to reach out to them?
Well, several times a year, I would say would be, if this is your whole portfolio and you're only responsible for that number of people, some people might like to have you reach out monthly. It depends, I think, on the person. My experience has been that lots of times, a lot of retired people, maybe they don't get out into the community as much, and they appreciate being invited out for lunch or saying, hey, can I stop over and visit you at your home? And I think, some people like it. So I would ask them, really, that's the best way to come up with it. Am I calling you too often? It's not, or, maybe am I not calling you enough? And most people will be honest, tell you.
Right, right. We have a question from John who said, a giving club implies some sort of a benefit for being in a club. What
Oh,
kind of benefits are appealing to major donors?
well, that's a good question. I didn't talk about the benefits. Sometimes it's just, I've worked with a lot of libraries, and a lot of times they would send their giving club members a leather bookmark. I mean, and people appreciated that. Um, I think again, it depends on the person, and the organization, what type of things. If you're performing arts or something, you might want to give people, members of our so-and-so club get to come to free performance every year or something. Maybe you have a special concert or something, and they get free admission to the museum or the zoo or the aquarium or things like that. But I think a lot of times, I think it's knowing your donors and knowing what really they appreciate. But it depends a lot too on your organization. Like, what is your organization? Maybe if you're a university, maybe they get invited to lectures once in a while that other people would have to pay to attend. So any kind of thing that fits in with your mission, and obviously it fits in with their interests, or they wouldn't be giving to you. So I think things like that are really appreciated.
Sure. Thank you. We have a question from Janaki. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Who says a couple of donors gave major gifts through DAFs, donor advised funds. Could you talk a bit about acknowledgement, et cetera? And I know that there's a difficulty which many organizations have in initially just finding out who made this gift. But
Right.
address that however you wish, Linda. I'm sure that this is going to be very helpful to folks.
I think that's an interesting question. And, again, you're in that dilemma of, do they want to remain anonymous? And if they do, there isn't much you can do about it. But on the other hand, sometimes, and I don't work real closely with donor advised people, so I'm not sure if they would be able to explain to the person, this organization wants to recognize you for what you've given. So do you mind if we share your name with them? But I remember once I had a board member who came into my office one day with a deposit slip for $50,000. And I said, what is this? And he said, oh, this donor wants to remain anonymous. And I said, well, wait a minute. I have to know who it was, because how am I going to thank them? This was not a donor advised fund, but he just took a $50,000 check from the donor and walked to the bank and deposited it in our organization's bank account. And I said, this is not the meaning of anonymous. Anonymous means we're not going to make their name public, but I have to know. I said, what if the IRS contacts me and says, this person said they made a $50,000 gift, did they? And I don't know if I don't know the name. So I I had to really go and handle it with going to somebody else on the board and saying, look, this is not what they mean when they say anonymous. But with donor advised funds, I think, there may be some people who do want to remain anonymous. And of course, the advisor has to be the one to make that determination, I guess, but.
Right. And to your point about taxes, they've already received the tax benefit through setting up the fund in the first place. So it's not that the letter they're looking for, but the cultivation or the stewardship, I should say, that you're
Right,
talking about is so important. And
right.
so it's good to investigate. I know this is a riddle we've discussed in other episodes, and thank you for taking it on, Linda. Karen had asked, most of our donations go towards paying staff salaries because our grants fund everything else. How would we craft a letter about where their money goes that doesn't sound self-serving?
Well, I think this is a big issue with a lot of people, and I'm afraid I don't agree with the foundations who say they won't fund salaries, because you can't run programs without salaries. So really, I always think that there is no program unless you have salaries. So I don't think it's at all misleading to put those salaries under the program expenses, because that's what they are. You can't run a university if you don't pay teachers to teach kids. So salaries are really a legitimate program expense. So I don't think there's anything deceptive or misleading about doing that, but putting those salaries where they belong.
Right, right. I want to point out that we had comments in the chat, a lot of wonderful comments today, Linda. And I just want to let you know that people have been very engaged, and some have been also offering advice to others, or also responding in tandem with you. And I just want to point out one, which is, or a couple, Andrea, who had said, with DAFs, we remind our donors that that would like recognition to let us know if a gift is inbound from their DAF, in what amount and for what purpose, so they can look out for it and confirm its arrival, because sometimes that's all you know is the amount, just like with the deposit slip.
Right.
And then they can make that connection. And then Nikki, who had said, I'll jump in with a suggestion around DAFs. If it's managed by a community foundation, reach out to staff to ask. We work closely with our advisors to know if they want to truly make a donation anonymously or not. And we also routinely receive thanks and stewardship from grantees to pass on to those anonymous donors. And having a relationship, of course, with these entities like the community foundations, where so many DAFs exist, is a good idea, regardless of this.
And I want to thank all of you who jumped in, because I'm not the only person who, I don't know it all, So it's great to have some of you who have worked more with DAFs than I have to jump in and give that advice.
Well, we've had a lot of great interaction all the way through, and a lot of appreciation for you, Linda. Thank you very much for everything today. We really appreciate it. You've been here before. We have recordings of Linda's sessions that you can see over again on the DonorSearch site. We've also shared her information, I think, in the chat and here, so you can look for her books. There are too many of them to name, which is why I didn't at the start. But I hope you'll look for them and put them on your shelf. And I want to thank everybody here, not only for being a part of this today, but for being such an active and fun group with so much great information. We really do appreciate you. And I hope you'll return again next week, when we have that session on enhancing retention and stewardship. That's again on how to raise, next Thursday at 1 p.m. But look for that and everything else with this series by just making sure you're part of the DonorSearch mailing list, so they can keep you up to date on everything in the Philanthropy Mastermind series, all three of these shows. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. Please fill out your surveys.
And
Thank you,
so
Linda.
much. I want to just remind people to continue what you did today, is share your knowledge with everybody else in the room, because we're all stronger together.
Absolutely. Till next time, folks.